The notification pierced the opera house silence. A single message that turned Germano Trevisani's blood to ice. Your wife is burning. Come watch. His phone clattered against marble. Around him, Milan's elite continued watching La Traviata, oblivious as Il Diavolo, the devil himself, rose from his velvet seat, every instinct screaming danger. 20 years commanding Italy's underworld had taught him to separate bluff from genuine threat. This was neither. Quick pause. Tell me in the comments where you're watching from. If this story has you hooked, hit like and subscribe, because what's coming next is even more intense. This was an execution announcement, delivered with surgical cruelty. Germano's reflection flashed in the opera house mirror as he strode toward the exit. Sharp features hardened by violence, dark eyes that had watched men beg, a jaw carved from Carrara marble. At 47, silver streaked his black hair, giving him the look of a wolf entering his prime. His tailored Brioni suit concealed scars that mapped a brutal ascension. 3 assassination attempts survived, 2 gang wars won, countless betrayals avenged. None of it mattered now. Because 60 kilometers away, Mary, 8 months pregnant, radiant with life he'd never dared imagine possible, was trapped in their lakeside villa. Mary, who'd looked past Il Diavolo in a Florence gallery 3 years ago and somehow seen the man underneath. Mary, who asked no questions about blood money but filled their home with music and laughter and the dangerous promise of normalcy. The Maserati screamed through rain-slicked mountain roads, engine howling past 190 kilometers per hour. Through sheets of rain, orange light bloomed against low clouds, hellfire painting the night sky above Lake Como. His estate. His sanctuary. His world. Burning. Germano pressed the accelerator harder, tires shrieking through hairpin turns. In the rearview mirror, his reflection showed what newspapers called a monster. But monsters didn't feel terror like this, soul-deep, primal, absolute. The villa appeared as he crested the final hill, a funeral pyre consuming everything he tried to build beyond violence. Flames shot from bulletproof windows he'd personally installed. Smoke rose in columns that mocked every precaution he'd taken. And there, silhouetted against the inferno on the second-floor balcony, white nightgown making her look like an angel awaiting judgment, stood Mary. Germano abandoned the car while still moving, rolling across wet gravel, already running toward the flames that separated him from the only thing he'd ever truly feared losing. Whoever did this will pay, he thought, tasting smoke and fury. But first I save her. The heat hit Germano like a physical wall, superheated air that seared his lungs with each breath. The main entrance had collapsed inward, a cascade of burning timber blocking the ornate doorway where Mary had kissed him goodbye 12 hours ago. 12 hours. A business dinner in Milan. Negotiations with the Calabrians over shipping routes. Handshakes and wine while someone prepared this nightmare. Germano circled the villa's perimeter, dress shoes sliding on wet stone. The east wing was completely engulfed, flames roaring from shattered windows like demonic mouths. The west wing, where their bedroom overlooked the lake, showed smoke damage but no visible fire yet. Above, Mary hadn't moved. She stood motionless on the balcony, one hand pressed against the French doors behind her, the other cradling her swollen belly. Even from here he could see her nightgown was gray with smoke. Mary. His voice shredded raw. Mary. No response. Unconscious standing up? Shock. Carbon monoxide? The wrought iron trellis that supported her climbing roses offered the only path up. Germano gripped the decorative metalwork, feeling heat transfer instantly through his palms. The roses she'd planted last spring, white and red, symbols of their wedding, had already withered to ash. He climbed. Each handhold was agony. The metal seared through his skin, blistering instantly. Below, distant sirens finally wailed. The private fire brigade from Como, still 10 minutes away. 10 minutes Mary didn't have. Halfway up, a window exploded outward, showering him with glass. Flames licked out, scorching his neck, igniting his jacket sleeve. Germano kept climbing, beating out the fire with his free hand while ascending with the other. The balcony railing was cooler, blessed metal that hadn't yet caught the full heat. He hauled himself over, landing hard on the Italian tile that Mary had selected personally. "Travertine," she'd said, "because it stays cool even in summer." Now it was slick with water from the rain and super hot from rising heat below. Mary lay collapsed against the French doors, her face slack, lips tinged blue. Smoke poured from gaps around the door frame. The bedroom beyond was lost. Germano gathered her into his arms, her pregnant weight familiar despite the horror. Their child, their daughter, the ultrasound had revealed last month, pressed between them, a heartbeat he couldn't feel through panic and adrenaline. "Stay with me," he commanded, voice hoarse. "You don't get to leave. Not like this. Not ever." The trellis was impossible to descend while carrying her. Germano looked down at snow-dusted gardens 15 feet below, then at the flames now reaching toward them from the bedroom. No choice. He stepped onto the railing, Mary clutched against his chest and jumped. They landed in her rose garden, Germano taking the impact through his shoulder and back, twisting to protect Mary's belly. Pain exploded through his spine, but he rolled away from the villa, away from falling debris and heat that felt like standing near the sun. Across the driveway, the second floor collapsed inward with a sound like God's judgment. Timber and stone and memories crashing down in an avalanche of sparks and flame. Germano knelt in mud and ash, cradling Mary's unconscious form, pressing his scorched hands to her stomach, desperate for movement, for proof their daughter still lived. The sirens grew louder. And over Mary's soot-stained face, Germano made his first promise. "Whoever did this will pay. In blood. In screams. In everything they hold dear." Then, softer, a second promise meant only for her. "But first I'll make sure you wake up. Both of you." The fluorescent lights of Como's private hospital burned like an accusation. Germano sat motionless in the ICU corridor, still wearing his ruined suit, hands wrapped in gauze that already showed seepage from burst blisters. He'd refused treatment until Mary was stable. She wasn't stable. Severe smoke inhalation, Dr. Rossi had explained, her professional composure cracking as she recognized exactly who sat before her. Second-degree burns on her arms. "The baby's heart rate is erratic. We're doing everything." "Do more," Germano had said quietly. The doctor had fled. Now, for hours into dawn, Marco Santini arrived with fresh clothes and preliminary intelligence. His oldest lieutenant looked grim, carrying a tablet and an expression that said the news was worse than the burns. "Accelerant," Marco said without preamble, pulling up fire marshal photos. "Professional grade. Poured along load-bearing walls to ensure complete structural collapse. Security cameras were disabled remotely at 23:47, exactly 13 minutes before ignition." Germano's jaw tightened. "Inside job. Has to be. The system requires 3 separate authentication codes to shut down. Only 5 people have access." Marco hesitated. "You, me, Vittorio, Teresa, and Antonio Greco." Antonio. Head of estate security. 10-year veteran who'd served Germano's father before him. A man Germano had trusted with his home, his wife, his unborn child. "Where is he?" "Disappeared. Hasn't reported in, phone's off, apartment's empty." Marco's voice dropped. "Germano, if Antonio turned. Then I'll know why before he dies." Germano stood, wincing as movement pulled at burns across his back. "Put the word out. 50,000 euros for information. 100,000 for Antonio himself, alive and able to talk." Through the ICU window, he could see Mary's motionless form, connected to machines that beeped her continued existence. An oxygen mask covered her soot-stained face. Her hands, delicate hands that had traced his scars and called them beautiful, lay still against white sheets. Germano pressed his forehead to the glass, remembering. 3 years ago. Florence. The Uffizi Gallery after hours, a private auction for Caravaggio's Lost Judith and Holofernes. Germano had attended to launder money through art acquisition, playing the cultured collector while his real business waited in Swiss accounts. She'd approached him boldly, a translator working the event, dark hair pinned elegantly, wearing a dress that cost less than his watch but somehow looked more expensive. "You're staring at the wrong painting," she'd said in perfect Italian with a slight Milanese accent. "The Artemisia Gentileschi across the room is superior. Same subject, better execution, painted by a woman who understood violence personally." He'd been intrigued despite himself. "You think I understand violence? I think you're Germano Trevisani, and you're not what you pretend to be." Her smile had been fearless. "Neither am I. I'm Mary Bianchi, I'm putting myself through university on translator fees, and my brother works in logistics, which is what people say when they work for men like you. That honesty, that audacity, that refusal to pretend ignorance." He'd fallen that night, though he hadn't admitted it for 6 more months. Now she was dying because someone had decided the fastest way to break an unbreakable man was to burn away the thing he loved most. Dr. Rossi emerged exhausted. "The baby's heart rate has stabilized. Mary's responding to oxygen therapy. But she needs to wake up soon or—" The doctor didn't finish. "Can she hear me?" Germano asked. "Possibly. Coma patients sometimes." He was already moving past her, shedding the gauze wrappings despite Dr. Rossi's protests. His blistered hands found Mary's, intertwining their fingers as he leaned close to her masked face. "You don't get to leave," he whispered. "I know I kept you separate from my world. I know I built walls between who I am at home and who I am everywhere else. I thought I was protecting you." His voice cracked. "But you were right that night in Florence. I'm not what I pretend to be. And neither are you. You're not some innocent the first need to shield. You're the woman who saw through Il Diavolo and chose him anyway." The heart monitor beeped steadily. No response. "So wake up," Germano commanded, his tone shifting to the voice that made grown men confess. "Wake up and tell me I'm an idiot for thinking protection and honesty are different things. Wake up and meet our daughter. Wake up, Mary, because whoever did this is going to pay, but first I need you to survive." Outside, Marco's phone buzzed. Then again. Then continuously. The manhunt had begun. Antonio Greco surfaced exactly where desperate men always did. His sister's apartment in Milan's Giambolino district, a neighborhood where omerta still meant something and police rarely ventured after dark. Marco's people found him in 18 hours. They brought him to Germano's emergency headquarters, a warehouse near the Naviglio Grande that officially stored restaurant equipment but actually housed the machinery of his empire's enforcement division. Antonio arrived hooded, zip-tied, terrified. Germano was waiting in a chair that had seen interrogations before. He'd changed into fresh clothes, black suit, black shirt, no tie. His burned hands were properly bandaged now, though he'd refused pain medication. He wanted clarity. "Remove the hood," he said quietly. Marco complied. Antonio blinked in the warehouse's harsh lights, his weathered face showing 3 days of fear, hollow eyes, unshaven, still wearing the same clothes from the night of the fire. "Boss, Antonio started. "Don't." Germano's voice was nice. "Don't insult me with denial. The cameras didn't disable themselves. The security protocols didn't bypass themselves. You did it, Antonio. 10 years of loyalty, my father's trust before mine, and you helped someone try to murder my pregnant wife." Antonio's face crumpled. Not defiance. Not anger. Just defeated shame. "My daughter," he whispered. "Rosa. She's 17, she got sick, leukemia. The treatments I couldn't afford, and then the debts." Tears tracked through stubble. "I started gambling, just to make extra money. But I lost. I kept losing. 50,000 euros to an underground casino in Chinatown. They were going to hurt Rosa, boss. They said they'd hurt my baby girl. Germano felt his rage crystallize into something colder than fury, understanding. Antonio hadn't betrayed him for greed. He'd betrayed him for love. The same love that had sent Germano through flames tonight. It didn't matter. It couldn't matter. Who approached you? Germano asked. Who offered to clear your debt? I don't know his name. Tall guy, maybe 40, distinctive scar across his left cheek like someone cut his ear to jaw. Spoke perfect Italian but with a slight Russian accent. He knew everything, Rosa's condition, my debts, my access codes. He said all I had to do was disable security for 1 hour. Just 1 hour, no one would get hurt, just a message to you about business. Russian accent. Germano's blood chilled further. His mother had been Russian, his father Italian. A union that gave him connections in both worlds but also enemies in both families. This man gave you a phone number? Antonio nodded miserably. Marco produced a burner phone from Antonio's confiscated possessions. Germano took it with bandaged hands, scrolled through the minimal call log. One number called 6 times over 3 weeks. The last call, the night of the fire, 23:30. 17 minutes before the cameras went dark. Germano memorized the number, then looked back at Antonio. The older man was weeping now, full-body sobs of shame and terror. My wife is in critical condition, Germano said softly. My daughter, my unborn daughter, almost died tonight because you chose your family over mine. I understand that choice, Antonio. In your position, I'd have done the same. Hope flashed across Antonio's face, quickly extinguished by Germano's next words. But understanding doesn't equal forgiveness. You know how this works. Please, Antonio begged. Rosa needs me. She's only 17. And my daughter hasn't even been born yet. Germano stood, wincing as movement pulled burned skin. But I'm not my father, Antonio. I don't kill men for loving their children too much. He nodded to Marco. Take him to Dr. Russo. Get Rosa into the leukemia treatment program at San Rafael. The best care, completely funded. Anonymous donation. Antonio's face collapsed in confusion and desperate gratitude. Then, Germano continued, you disappear. New city, new name, new life. You have 48 hours to leave Italy. If I ever see you again, if you ever contact anyone from your old life, if you breathe one word about what you know, I'll take back every penny of Rosa's treatment and you'll watch her die before I let you follow. It was mercy more terrifying than execution. Antonio understood, exile with the debt of his daughter's life hanging over him forever. Thank you, he whispered. Boss, thank you. Don't thank me. Germano turned away. Thank Mary. She dies, so do you and everyone you love. Now get him out of my sight. After Antonio was removed, Germano stood alone in the warehouse, staring at the burner phone. Marco reappeared from the shadows. You went soft, Marco observed neutrally. No. I went strategic. Antonio's not the architect, he's a tool. Germano held up the phone. This number? Trace it. Find the Russian with the scar. Find who's behind this. And if it leads where I think it leads? Marco's expression was grim. Then family blood will spill. Germano's voice held no emotion. Because someone close enough to know Antonio's vulnerabilities, someone with Russian connections, someone who understands my organization's structure well enough to exploit it? He didn't finish. He didn't need to. The list of suspects was very, very short. The burner phone number belonged to a telecommunications hub in Moscow. The calls were routed through 3 proxy servers before terminating at a registered phone in Milan. A phone Germano had called 100 times himself. Leonardo Bianchi. Mary's older brother. His lieutenant for 8 years. Germano sat in his penthouse office overlooking the Duomo, dawn light painting the cathedral's spires gold while his world turned to ash. The evidence spread across his desk told a story he'd been blind to, willfully blind perhaps, because acknowledging it meant confronting an impossible truth. Leonardo's financial records showed payments to the Chinatown casino where Antonio accumulated debts. Payments that started 6 months ago, exactly when Mary announced her pregnancy. Surveillance logs revealed Leonardo had keys to the lakeside estate, access codes and security protocols. He'd visited frequently while Germano traveled for business, claiming to check on his sister. Each visit coincided with Antonio's shift rotations. Most damning, a recording of Marco's people recovered from the casino's security system. Leonardo captured on grainy footage, speaking with a tall man matching Antonio's description. Scar across his left cheek, Russian features. The audio was corrupted, but their body language told the story. Coordination, planning, conspiracy. Germano's phone buzzed. The hospital. He answered before the first ring was completed. Is she awake? Dr. Rossi said, her relief audible. Mary's awake. Asking for you. The world tilted. Germano gripped his desk, feeling something loosen in his chest that had been locked tight for 3 days. The baby? Strong heartbeat. No signs of distress. Mr. Trevisani, I don't know how, but they're both going to be fine. He ended the call, staring at the evidence before him. Mary was alive. Their daughter was safe. And her brother, the man who'd introduced them, who'd stood at their wedding, who'd celebrated when Mary announced her pregnancy, had tried to burn them both alive. Marco entered without knocking, his expression grave. The council is asking questions. Word spreading about the attack. They want to know how you'll respond. The council, 5 old men who'd overseen Milano's operations since Germano's father's time. They respected strength, tradition, codes that predated modern law. An attack on a boss's pregnant wife violated every code. They'd expect blood. They get it. But first, Germano needed to understand why. Set up a meeting with Leonardo, Germano said quietly. Tell him I need his help investigating the fire. Make it sound desperate. Make him think I'm vulnerable. He'll know it's a trap. He'll come anyway. Arrogance makes men stupid. Germano gathered the evidence, locking it in his safe. And I need to see my wife. 20 minutes later, he stood beside Mary's hospital bed, watching her sleep again. This time naturally, peacefully. The oxygen mask was gone, replaced by a nasal cannula. Her color had returned, that olive Mediterranean complexion he'd memorized in 1,000 quiet mornings. Her eyes opened. Brown, intelligent, seeing through him as always. Germano, she whispered, her voice raw from smoke damage. He took her hand carefully, mindful of her burns. I'm here. You're safe. The baby's safe. The villa? Gone. But we're building something better. Mary studied his face with that unnerving perception that had attracted him from the start. You know who did it? It wasn't a question. Germano had never been able to lie to her successfully, another reason he'd kept her separate from his world. He couldn't deceive her, so he'd simply hidden entire parts of his life instead. No more hiding. The fire had burned away that possibility. Yes, he said simply. Tell me. Rest first. The doctors say. Germano. Her voice sharpened despite its hoarseness. Tell me. So he told her. Not everything, not yet, but enough. The investigation. Antonio's confession. The trail leading to someone close, someone with family access. Mary's hand tightened in his. Leonardo. You knew. I suspected. Tears formed in her eyes, not grief but fury. He's been different since the pregnancy. Bitter. Making comments about you going soft, about me changing you. I thought it was just, I don't know, jealousy that I got out of our old neighborhood and he's still. She stopped, understanding blooming across her face. He thought marrying me to you would elevate him. He thought I was his investment. Mary? And when you kept him as lieutenant instead of promoting him, when you started talking about legitimate business and stepping back after the baby came. Her voice broke. He tried to kill me. His own sister. He tried to kill your daughter. Germano said nothing. What could he say? Does that family mean something different in his world? That betrayal was always personal? That he should have seen it coming? What are you going to do? Mary asked. What I do, Germano said quietly. What I've always done. But Mary, I need you to understand, when this is over, there's no going back. You'll know everything. See everything. Be part of everything I tried to keep you separate from. I never wanted separation. Mary pulled his hand to her chest, over her heart. I wanted a partnership. I wanted all of you, not the edited version you thought I could handle. Even when that version is Il Diavolo? Especially then. She smiled weakly. Did you think I didn't know? That I couldn't feel who you really were every time you held me? I fell in love with the monster and the man Germano. I stayed because you were both. Dr. Rossi entered, interrupting. I need to examine. Oh. She stopped, seeing their intertwined hands, the intensity of their connection. 5 minutes, Germano said, not looking away from Mary. The doctor nodded and retreated. Promise me something, Mary whispered. When you find Leonardo, when you do what you're going to do, promise you'll come back. Not as Il Diavolo. As my husband. As our daughter's father. I promise. Liar. But she smiled. You'll come back as both. And I'll be waiting. 5 days after the fire, Leonardo Bianchi arrived at Germano's penthouse with practiced concern etched across his handsome features. He was 36, tall and athletic, with the same dark coloring as Mary but harder edges. A man accustomed to operating in Germano's shadow. Boss, Leonardo embraced him carefully, noting the visible bandages. I came as soon as I heard you wanted to meet. How's Mary? Recovering. The baby stable. Germano gestured to the sitting area overlooking Milano's skyline. Thank you for coming. Family. Leonardo said the word like scripture. We take care of our own. The hypocrisy should have been laughable. Instead, Germano felt ice crystallize around his heart. He'd spent 5 days planning this moment, consulting with Marco, Vittorio, and Teresa, his true inner circle. They'd confirmed Leonardo's betrayal, uncovered 6 months of careful preparation, documented conversations with Antonio, identified the Russian enforcer, currently floating in Lake Como with concrete boots. But confirmation wasn't enough. Germano needed Leonardo to confess, needed the words for what came next. I need your help, Germano said, playing his role perfectly. Someone close did this. Someone who knew our security, our patterns. I'm losing control, Leonardo. The fire, Mary almost dying, the baby. He let his voice crack convincingly. I can't think straight. Leonardo leaned forward, eyes gleaming with something that looked like sympathy but tasted like anticipation. You're exhausted. You've been at the hospital constantly. Let me handle the investigation. No. Germano shook his head. I need you here. With the family business. Marco's good, but he's not blood. You are. The lie burned worse than the fire had. Mary would want her brother protecting our interests while I'm vulnerable. There. The magic word. Vulnerable. Leonardo's expression flickered, just for a microsecond, with satisfaction. Of course. Whatever you need. Maybe it's time to restructure anyway. You've been talking about going legitimate, focusing on the baby. The old families are getting nervous, thinking you're losing your edge. And what do you think? Germano asked softly. I think. Leonardo chose his words carefully. I think fatherhood changes men. Make them cautious. Mary's amazing, but she's made you want different things. Domestic things. The empire needs a leader who's still hungry. Someone like you? I didn't say that. You didn't have to. Germano stood, walking to the window. Milano spread below like a chessboard he'd mastered. Tell me something, Leonardo. When you introduced me to Mary 3 years ago, what were you hoping for? Silence. Then, I wanted my sister to be happy. And, And I thought, Leonardo's voice hardened. I thought bringing you together would finally make you see me as a real family. An alliance boss. But you married her and kept me exactly where I was, lieutenant, never partner. Your wife's brother, never your equal. So you burned our home. Germano didn't turn around. You tried to murder your pregnant sister and my unborn daughter. Because I didn't promote you fast enough. The silence stretched. Then Leonardo laughed, a bitter, ugly sound. You can't prove anything. I don't need to prove it. Germano turned, his face showing Il Diavolo now. All pretense of vulnerability evaporated. I know it. Antonio confessed before I sent him away. The Russian with the scar is dead. Your financial records show everything. And the council. He smiled without warmth. The council already knows. Leonardo's hand moved toward his jacket, toward the gun he always carried. He froze when 6 red laser dots appeared on his chest, tracking from hidden positions around the penthouse. Marco emerged from the bedroom, weapon drawn. Vittorio from the kitchen. Teresa from the balcony. Even Don Salvatore, the eldest council member, stepped from Germano's private study, his ancient face carved from disappointment. Leonardo Bianchi, Don Salvatore's voice creaked like old leather. You have been accused of attempting to murder your sister, your boss's pregnant wife, and his unborn child. You have been accused of conspiracy, betrayal, and violating every code we hold sacred. What do you say? Leonardo looked trapped, wild-eyed. Then his face twisted with rage. She made him weak. All of you see it, Il Diavolo talking about legitimate business, about stepping back, about being a father. We're criminals, not businessmen. We built this empire on fear, and he's throwing it away for domestic bliss. You tried to kill your own blood, Don Salvatore said quietly. There is no empire worth that. I was protecting it. Leonardo screamed. I was protecting all of us from his weakness. Germano crossed the room in 3 strides, moving faster than an injured man should. He grabbed Leonardo by the throat, lifting him slightly, eyes burning with controlled fury. My wife is not my weakness, he said, voice deadly soft. My daughter is not my weakness. They are my purpose, the thing I've built this empire to protect. You thought love made me soft? You have no idea what a man will do when you threaten the people he loves. He released Leonardo, who collapsed into a chair, gasping. The council has decided, Don Salvatore announced. Death would be merciful. Exile is not. Leonardo Bianchi, you are stripped of your name, your wealth, your position. You will leave Italy with enough money to survive but never to rebuild. You will never contact your family. You will never return to Milano. You are erased. What? Leonardo's face went white. You can't, Mary would never? Mary doesn't know yet, Germano said. And when I tell her, I'll tell her you're dead. Because to us you are. You chose power over family. Now you have neither. 2 of Marco's enforcers appeared, grabbing Leonardo's arms. He struggled, screaming obscenities, threats, desperate pleas. Then suddenly, chillingly, he stopped. His eyes fixed on Germano with pure hatred. She'll leave you, Leonardo hissed. When Mary knows what you really are, the violence, the murders, the empire built on suffering, she'll take your daughter and run. You think love survives truth? You think she'll stay when she sees the monster unmasked? Germano met his gaze steadily. We'll see. Take him away. As Leonardo was dragged from the penthouse, his screams echoing down the stairwell, Don Salvatore placed a weathered hand on Germano's shoulder. Your father would have killed him, the old man said. I'm not my father. No. Don Salvatore smiled faintly. You're better. Or worse. Time will tell which. Mary was sitting up when Germano arrived at the hospital that evening. The improvement was remarkable. Color returned to her cheeks, the oxygen removed completely, her hands resting protectively on her belly where their daughter kicked rhythmically. She knew immediately. It's done? Yes. Leonardo? alive, exiled. He'll never bother us again. Germano pulled a chair close to her bed, their knees almost touching. Mary, I need to tell you something. Everything actually. No more walls. I've been waiting 3 years for this conversation. He started at the beginning. His father's empire, the violence he inherited at 27, the wars he fought, the men he killed. He detailed the money laundering, the political corruption, the shipping routes that moved more than legal goods. He explained why he'd kept her separate. Not shame, but terror that if she truly saw him, she'd recognize a monster. I built you a cage, he admitted. Called it protection, called it love. But really, I was protecting myself from your judgment. From the moment you might look at me and see what everyone else sees. Il Diavolo. Mary listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, silence settled between them like fog. Are you done? She asked finally. Yes. Good. She took his bandaged hand firmly. Now let me tell you something about the woman you married. I'm not some innocent you corrupted Germano. I'm from Giambolino. I grew up 3 blocks from the social club where your father held court. I knew who Leonardo worked for before I met you. When I approached you at that gallery, it wasn't a coincidence. It was curiosity. Germano stared. What? Leonardo had been talking about his boss for months. The young Trevisani, brutal but brilliant, rebuilding his father's empire into something more sophisticated. I wanted to see if the rumors were true. She smiled faintly. They were. But I also saw something Leonardo missed. You were exhausted. 20 years old at the game and already tired of it. Looking at that Caravaggio like it offered escape. You set up our meeting? I created the opportunity. You chose to see me again. Mary's grip tightened. I fell in love knowing exactly who you were. Then you started hiding, compartmentalizing, trying to show me only the parts you thought I could handle. Do you know how insulting that is? To have your husband treat you like a child who needs protection from reality? I was trying to control the narrative, to keep me in a beautiful cage where I couldn't choose you with full knowledge. Her voice softened. I don't need protection from your world, Germano. I need partnership. I need honesty. I need to know when someone like my brother is circling, building resentment, plotting against us. Because if you trusted me with the truth about your organization, I could have warned you about Leonardo's bitterness months ago. The words hit like bullets. She was right. Completely, devastatingly right. So here's what happens now, Mary continued, her tone brooking no argument. No more separation. I'm not running your operations. I'm not interested in that life. But I'm not ignorant of it either. We're partners. You tell me when something threatens our family. I tell you when I see patterns you're missing. We make decisions together. The council will never. The council just watched you exile my brother to protect me and our daughter. They already know I'm not going anywhere. Make them understand or I will. Germano felt something shift fundamentally, not weakness but strength of a different kind. For 20 years he'd ruled alone, trusted sparingly, loved never. Now here was Mary, 8 months pregnant, recovering from attempted murder, calmly demanding full partnership in his empire. Your brother said you'd leave, Germano admitted. When you know everything. He said love doesn't survive truth. Leonardo never understood love. He understood transactions. Mary pulled Germano's hand to her belly, where their daughter kicked again. She'll know her father. All of him. The good, the bad, the criminal empire, the man who ran through fire to save us. And when she's old enough, she'll choose whether to accept him. Just like I'm choosing now. Even knowing what I've done? What will I continue to do? Especially then. Mary's eyes were fierce. I'm not choosing despite who you are, Germano. I'm choosing it because of it. The man who built an empire, the man who keeps his word whether it's a promise or a threat, the man who's loyal until betrayed and devastating when crossed. That's who I fell in love with. Not the sanitized version. All of you. Germano leaned forward, resting his forehead against hers, breathing in her hospital smell mixed with faint traces of her lavender perfume. "I don't deserve you," he whispered. "Probably not." She smiled against his skin. "But you've got me anyway. Now kiss me and tell me about the new estate. I want multiple escape routes, panic rooms, and a nursery that isn't a death trap." He kissed her, gentle because she was still healing, fierce because she was alive, eternal because she'd chosen him knowing everything. When they broke apart, Mary had one more question. Did Leonardo suffer? Not enough. Good. Now go handle whatever crisis Marco's been texting you about. I can see your phone buzzing in your pocket. Your wife isn't dying anymore. You can return to work. As Germano left the hospital room, he caught his reflection in the darkened window. Il Diavolo stared back, but now, for the first time, the devil had someone who saw past the title to the man beneath, and chose him anyway. 3 months later, Lake Maggiore gleamed under autumn's sun. The new estate rose from landscaped grounds like something from a fairy tale. If fairy tales included bulletproof glass, biometric security, and panic rooms disguised as wine cellars. Mary stood on the terrace, 9 months pregnant and radiating contentment. She'd helped design every aspect of their home, from the visible beauty to the invisible protections. The architect had learned to incorporate both Italian villa aesthetics and tactical fortress requirements without batting an eye. Inside, Germano reviewed quarterly reports with Marco. The empire had reorganized under Mary's surprisingly astute suggestions. Diversification into legitimate holdings, shell company restructuring, a venture capital fund that actually invested in real businesses while laundering money through authentic profits. She's better at this than half our accountants, Marco admitted, reviewing Mary's latest proposal for a hospitality acquisition. Last month's recommendations increased our clean revenue by 18%. She has an economics degree we never let her use, Germano said, signing off on the proposal. Turns out my wife is brilliant when you actually listen to her. The old families are adjusting. Marco chose his words carefully. Don Salvatore thinks you've created something unprecedented. A partnership where... Mary appeared in the doorway, one hand supporting her back. Where does the boss's wife actually participate instead of just looking pretty at dinners? Shocking. I was going to say, where traditional power structures meet modern thinking, Marco finished diplomatically. But yes, that too. Over 3 months, Mary had transformed from protected innocent to respected advisor. She attended certain meetings, offered insights Germano's male-dominated council had missed, and maintained a reputation for being as ruthlessly practical as her husband. The underworld whispered about La Lupa, the she-wolf, who'd somehow made Il Diavolo more dangerous by making him whole. The Calabrians want a meeting about the southern routes, Marco continued. They're impressed by the restructuring. I want to explore partnership. Set it up. But Mary reviews any agreements first. Germano caught his wife's smile. She catches clauses I miss. Because you think like a hammer, Mary said fondly. Every problem looks like something to hit. I think like a negotiator. I married well. You married up. She winced, gripping the doorframe. And your daughter is practicing kickboxing on my internal organs. Germano was at her side instantly. Pain? False labor. 4th time this week. She's impatient like her father. Mary breathed through the contraction, then straightened. We should. Her water broke. All over the antique Persian rug Germano had purchased in Tehran. Now, Mary said calmly despite her widening eyes. We should go to the hospital now. The private clinic was 12 minutes away. Germano made it in 7. Marco followed in a second car with Teresa and a team of security. The medical staff, thoroughly vetted and generously compensated, moved with practiced efficiency. 8 hours later, at 3:47 a.m. on a Wednesday in October, Giulia Trevisani entered the world screaming. She had her mother's delicate features and her father's storm-gray eyes, an inheritance from Germano's Russian mother. Dark hair plastered to her tiny skull, fists waving like a fighter ready for battle. The nurse placed her on Mary's chest. Germano stood frozen, staring at this impossibly small person who somehow contained all of his hope and terror in 6 pounds of humanity. "Hold your daughter," Mary whispered, exhausted and radiant. Germano took Julia with infinite care, supporting her head like she was made of spun glass. She stopped crying, staring up at him with unfocused eyes that would sharpen to see him clearly in weeks. "Julia," he said softly, testing her name. "I'm your father. I run a criminal empire. I've done terrible things. I've killed men, destroyed lives, built wealth on blood and fear." His voice cracked. "And somehow you exist. Something pure came from something violent, and I don't understand it, but I'll spend every day of my life protecting it." Mary watched from the bed, tears streaming. "Tell her the rest." "I'll try to be worthy of you," Germano continued, thumb stroking Julia's tiny hand. "Your mother saw past the monster to something redeemable. Maybe you will too. And if you don't, if you grow up and decide your father is unforgivable, I'll accept that. Because you were born from love, not obligation. You get to choose your family." Julia's hand closed around his scarred finger, gripping with surprising strength. "Or maybe," Mary said softly, "she already has." 2 weeks later, Germano stood in the nursery at 2 a.m., watching Julia sleep in the crib he'd tested personally for safety. The room glowed with soft nightlights Mary had arranged, moons and stars projected on walls painted in soft gray and silver. He'd barely slept since birth, splitting time between feeding schedules, diaper changes, and running an empire that didn't stop for fatherhood. But exhaustion felt different now, purposeful rather than hollow. Mary appeared beside him, her body recovering well from delivery. "She's fine. You don't have to watch her breathe every 2 minutes. What if she stops?" "She won't. The baby monitor has medical-grade sensors. Also, you installed 3 backup cameras with cardiac monitoring." Mary took his hand. "Come to bed." Instead, Germano pulled her close, both of them watching their daughter's chest rise and fall with profound regularity. "Leonardo was wrong," Germano said quietly. "He thought you'd leave when you saw the truth. He thought love couldn't survive honesty." "Leonardo never understood that real love requires honesty," Mary corrected. "Protection without truth is just a prettier cage. I wasted 3 years building that cage. And now you're building something better. A partnership. A family. A life where our daughter will know exactly who her father is and choose to love him anyway." Mary rested her head on his shoulder. "That's scarier than the cage, isn't it? Being fully known." "Terrifying," Germano admitted. "Good. Welcome to vulnerability. It's where real strength lives." Below them, Lake Maggiore reflected moonlight like scattered diamonds. The Alps rose in the distance, eternal and indifferent to human dramas of love and betrayal and redemption. In the nursery, Julia stirred but didn't wake, dreaming whatever newborns dream, milk and warmth and the voices of the 2 people whose love had created her from violence transformed. And Germano understood finally, the greatest empire he'd ever built wasn't measured in territory or wealth or fear. It was measured in this: a sleeping daughter, a partner who saw his worst and stayed, and the terrifying grace of being chosen despite earning it. "Whoever tried to destroy this," he whispered, thinking of Leonardo's exile, Antonio's disappearance, the ashes of their first home, they failed. They just didn't understand what they were fighting. "What's that?" Mary asked. Germano kissed the top of her head, then looked down at Julia, his daughter, his future, his purpose. "Love that survived the fire." Julia Trevisani sat in her father's study, swinging her legs from the oversized leather chair that dwarfed her small frame. At 5 years old, she had her mother's sharp intelligence and her father's unsettling intensity, a combination that made even Don Salvatore uncomfortable during family gatherings. "Papa," she said, examining the antique Caravaggio on the wall. Why do you have a painting of a lady cutting off a man's head? Germano looked up from his laptop, where he'd been reviewing acquisition proposals Mary had flagged for his attention. His daughter wore a pink dress her mother had chosen, but she'd insisted on combat boots, a compromise that captured her perfectly. That's Judith and Holofernes, he explained, closing the laptop to give her his full attention. Judith saved her people by being brave when others were afraid. By cutting his head off? Sometimes strength requires difficult choices. Julia considered this with the seriousness she brought to all conversations. Then, Mama says you used to be scary. Before me. I'm still scared. Not to me. She slid off the chair, padding over to his desk. Mama also says Uncle Leonardo tried to hurt her and me when I was in her tummy. Is that true? Germano's hand stilled on his keyboard. 5 years old and already asking the questions he'd hoped to delay until she was older. But lying to Julia had never worked. She inherited her mother's ability to see through deception. Yes, he said simply. Where is he now? Gone. Far away. He can never hurt our family again. Julia absorbed this, her small face serious. Did you kill him? No. I showed him mercy. Germano lifted her onto his lap, meeting her storm-gray eyes that matched his own. Sometimes the strongest choice isn't violence. It's showing someone their powerlessness. Mama says you're different now. Because of us. Your mother is usually right. Are you still Il Diavolo? The question hung in the air. How did you explain to a 5-year-old that her father commanded a criminal empire? That people feared his name, that he'd built wealth on morally ambiguous foundations, that the legitimate businesses and charitable donations and respectable facade concealed darker truths? You didn't. You told her the truth and let her decide what to do with it. Yes, Germano said. I'm still that man. I run businesses that aren't always legal. I make choices that aren't always good. People call me a monster and sometimes they're right. But you saved Mama from the fire. I did. And you read to me every night. I do. And you teach me chess and mathematics and how to recognize when people are lying. Important skills. Julia leaned back against his chest, fitting perfectly under his chin. Then you're not a monster. You're just Papa. Something cracked in Germano's carefully constructed armor. Julia, one day you'll be old enough to understand everything I've done. Every choice, every consequence. And you might decide that you're my Papa, she interrupted with 5-year-old certainty. Mama chose you. I choose you. That's what family means. Through the study window, Lake Maggiore sparkled in afternoon light. Mary appeared in the doorway, phone in hand, wearing a business suit that somehow made her look more dangerous than any weapon. The Calabrian deal closed, she announced. They're very pleased with the terms. Also, Julia has homework. 5 more minutes, Julia negotiated. 3, Mary countered. And only because your father looks like he needs a moment. After Julia reluctantly departed for multiplication tables, Mary crossed to Germano's desk. She asked about Leonardo? And whether I'm still Il Diavolo. What did you tell her? The truth. And? She chose me anyway. Germano pulled Mary into his lap, where she fit as perfectly as their daughter had. How did we create someone so certain? So unafraid? We loved her honestly, Mary said simply. No cages. No pretending. She knows exactly who we are, and she's safe with that knowledge. Through the study door, they could hear Julia talking to herself while working through math problems, her voice carrying with perfect confidence. Leonardo thought love made me weak, Germano said quietly. That family was a liability. A target. And? He was right about it being a target. Wrong about it being a weakness. Germano's arms tightened around Mary. Turns out the most terrifying version of myself is the one with something to lose. The one with something worth burning the world to protect, Mary corrected. Outside, the empire ran itself through trusted lieutenants and legitimate expansions. Inside, a 5-year-old girl who didn't yet understand evil worked through homework with absolute faith that her father, monster, savior, businessman, killer, would check her answers before dinner. And Germano understood that the fire had burned away everything except what mattered, being fully known and chosen anyway. By a woman who saw past his armor and a daughter who hadn't learned to fear him yet. Maybe she never would. That was the greatest power he'd ever hold. Not fear, but love freely given despite knowing the truth. Whoever did this will pay, he'd promised over Mary's hospital bed 5 years ago. Leonardo had paid. Antonio had paid. Everyone who'd threatened his family had been dealt with through exile or worse. But the real victory wasn't revenge. It was this: a quiet afternoon in a lakeside study, his wife in his arms, his daughter counting in the next room, and the profound grace of being chosen by the people who knew exactly who he was. Il Diavolo still existed. Germano Trevisani still commanded an empire built on morally gray foundations. But he was also Papa. Also my husband. Also a man who'd learned that true strength wasn't hiding who you were. It was being fully yourself and trusting others to stay anyway. The fire hadn't destroyed his world. It had burned away the lies, leaving only truth. And truth, he'd discovered, was where real love lived.
If you enjoy watching this, please like and subscribe, and I will see you on the next one.